It is summer, and we are in a house that is not ours, sitting at a table, enjoying minutes of a rented silence. Hello, and welcome back to Litcast. Today we'll be exploring the context and big ideas in Douglas Dunn's Modern Love. Modern Love was written by Douglas Dunn and was published in 1986 in his Selected Poems. He is known as a poet for focusing on things like working class British life, domestic interiors, social texture, class realities, caregiving, memory, and emotional restraint. And lots of his poems carry these themes. This poem reflects 20th century realism. So it avoids any romantic exaggeration. Think about the connection between the other relationships poem that you have studied. And it presents love as grounded in this economic and social reality. Now, the title, Modern Love, actually deliberately references a poet called George Meredith, who wrote an 1862 sonnet sequence of around 50 sonnets. And this sequence was called Modern Love. But in these poems, he depicts a failing marriage, and there's these themes of alienation, betrayal, emotional turbulence, and love is shown in this sequence as dramatic and tragic. So Douglas Dunn takes that idea and inverts it. He turns it on its head. There's no drama in this poem, there's no betrayal, there's no formal sonnet structure. Instead, there's just this modest contentment in a rented house, and it moves from tragic drama to compressed lyric realism. Now, I mentioned that Douglas Dunn is known for focusing on working class British life, and you can see that socio-economic awareness in this poem. The couple live in this rented or shared house. They care for under 10s, children, and they also care for invalids who would be sick dependents, whether that's their parents or relatives, we don't know. It suggests this idea of limited space, limited money, and also constant responsibility. They talk about minutes of a rented silence, so even their time kind of isn't their own. The quiet moment is rare because of all those domestic pressures. And nature sort of functions as a bit of a backdrop here. So it's this kind of haven within the city life, and when that busyness sort of temporarily stops for them, the peace allows them to live in and be present in nature. So, how does that translate to some of the big ideas and themes within the poem? Well, modern love is seen as this modest and practical situation. The poem redefines that modern love as emotionally restrained, quietly stable, and rooted in that shared endurance, the fact that they've both stuck at it, they've worked through thick and thin. Love is not this big grand gesture or romantic idea. It is sitting together, sharing silence, and recognizing the value of stopping and sharing these small pauses. There's also love within responsibility. So the poem highlights, alongside love, caregiving, family obligations, close living arrangements, and they're all examples of different types of love in a way. The silence is only possible because the children are asleep, the neighbours are away, and love exists within this pressure of all these obligations and responsibilities, not outside of it. And the domestic duty becomes that expression of care and love. So let's think about that rented silence as well. And as with the other poems, we'll explore this a bit more when we do our line by line analysis. But that rented silence also shows the kind of fragility of this happiness. The silence being rented suggests that it's temporary. It also suggests that it can be commodified, that it can be taken or bought or used in some way. And likely, if you think about their situation, that silence is probably often taken. If they've got young children in the house, then their children are going to be loud. When they're awake, they'll be asking questions, they'll be asking for food, they'll be asking to play. And so that kind of noise will be there all the time. And in addition, they've got those caregiving responsibilities. There's also that idea of a lack of control. It's minutes of a rented silence suggest that they don't necessarily have control over when that silence is going to end. So that adds a kind of ephemeral nature to the silence, and it makes it more precious in a way. So happiness in this poem is brief, it's conditional, it's dependent on circumstance, and it's therefore kind of saying that we don't really own happiness, we borrow it. However, I would say that the tone of the poem is one of contentment and happiness. So there is this idea of contentment here over aspiration. It's a simple life, and it's one that they enjoy, and it's one that they can thrive in and focus on love in, and that's what they want. So they say no hope of better happiness than this might initially sound bleak, but actually, if that's all you want, if that situation is what you want, and if you have each other and you love each other, then it's much easier to reject a commercialized idea of a perfect life, which we see increasingly so now, even in modern contexts, where we're constantly being encouraged to strive for more things: a better car, a better house, a second car, a third car, holidays to other countries. And actually, you can be perfectly happy without all of those things. And this poem exemplifies that. So it rejects these idealistic notions of love, and as we talked about with Valentine, the commercialized notion of love is rejected as well. But it also rejects escalation. It rejects drama. Love doesn't have to be like a soap opera. And actually, love can be stable, it can be long-lasting, it can be uneventful and still be strong and still be wonderful. And this poem really celebrates the idea of love being enough, like enoughness, and emotional sufficiency. You're making sure each other's cups are filled. You're making sure that day to day the other person has time to breathe, has time to rest, and that in itself is an act of love. We also then in this poem have nature as emotional harmony. So we've got pigeons, trees, roses, and they're personified, and there's this calm, gentle imagery here. So it creates an almost pastoral atmosphere. So pastoral poetry normally idealizes kind of rural life and presents nature as peaceful, harmonious, and simple, and it contrasts that countryside calm with urban stress. So when we talk about pastoral, it's that temporary idealized calm created through natural imagery. And this poem definitely does that. There's that contrast of the usual noise of human intrusion with this lovely moment of silence and peace. And the garden being imperfect also demonstrates that love can thrive in imperfection, which again rejects this idea of idealized, perfected romantic love. And that anti-romantic sensibility continues. There's a lack of idealized structure. I mentioned that sonnet form. The sonnet is not used perfectly here. And that's deliberate because we want to show that actually the fairly restrictive form of a sonnet, which you could view as sophisticated, but inevitably because of the iambic pentameter that you need to use, the rhyming couplets, the specific amount of lines, all of that means that you are going to be more restricted than if you just write something free verse. So this kind of shows that that idealized structure is perfect, but you can also have an imperfect poem that demonstrates love of the same strength, just a different way of communicating it. We have here no rhyme scheme. We've got no dramatic climax, which will often happen in a sonnet. The final line about the cat actually utilizes a method called bathos or bathos. And if you're not sure what bathos is, it's a real anticlimax that's created by a sort of lapse in mood. So if we're talking about something that's really meaningful, really purposeful, maybe emotional or quite dramatic, and then we move very quickly to something that's trivial or ridiculous, The dictionary definition refers to from the sublime to the ridiculous. And the last line referring to the cat certainly does that. There's this real anticlimax that refers back to that domestic reality that they're living in. But what it does do there is it reinforces small scale happiness and contentment. They're not striving for more money, more this, more that. They're very content with the situation that they're in. They're content with each other, and they're content to have that moment of silence in the knowledge that it won't last forever. So there you have it, some of the context and big ideas from Douglas Dunn's Modern Love. We will be exploring the context and the big ideas of all the poems in the anthology before returning to each of them in turn for some line-by-line analysis to aid with revision. By no means are these episodes completely comprehensive, but hopefully they'll give you that little bit of a boost of confidence ready for your Unit 1 exam in the summer. Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this podcast useful, then please share it with other people and be sure to leave some feedback as well. All of our episodes are free at point of use, but if you wish to support us further, then there is a Ko-fi link in the description so you can tip us. Additional funds go to a range of good causes as well. Thank you so much again for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. If you found the podcast helpful and would like to support us further, then the Ko-fi link in the description will give you an opportunity to tip us. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one.